John chapter 21, verses 15 through 25. When they finished eating, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Simon replied, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." Jesus asked a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Simon replied, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus said to him, "Take care of my sheep." He asked a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was sad that Jesus asked him a third time. "Do you love me?" he replied. "Lord, you know everything. You know I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. I assure you that when you were younger, you tied your own belt and walked around wherever you wanted. When you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will tie your belt and lead you where you don't want to go." He said this to show the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. After saying this, Jesus said to Peter, "Follow me." Peter turned around and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them. This is the one who had leaned against Jesus at the meal and asked him, "Lord, who is going to betray you?" When Peter saw this disciple, he said to Jesus, "Lord, what about him?" Jesus replied, "If I want him to remain until I come, what difference does that make to you? You must follow me." Therefore, the word spread among the brothers and sisters that this disciple wouldn't die. However, Jesus didn't say he wouldn't die, but only, "If I want him to remain until I come, what difference does that make to you?" This is the disciple who testifies concerning these things and who wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true. Jesus did many other things as well. If all of them were recorded, I imagine the world itself wouldn't have enough room for the scrolls that would be written. The word of God for the people of God. You may be seated.
Thank you, Jen. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this opportunity to gather here as your people this morning. As we come, Lord, may it not be just another Sunday, but may it be one in which you reach down into our lives, you speak deeply into our hearts this morning. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, the story is told of a couple who lived in Scotland. They had been married for 45 years, and it was just a few days before Christmas, and the husband picked up the phone and called his son, who happened to live in London, and said, "Son, I don't want to ruin your Christmas. I'm sorry to do this, but I have to tell you that your mom and I are getting a divorce. After 45 years, we just got to call it quits. I can't stand to look at her another day. She can't stand to look at me another day. This is not going to work any longer." And so, not surprisingly, the son was shocked. He said, "Dad, what are you talking about? After 45 years? There can't be anything you can't work out at this point." So he hung up the phone. He says, "I'm going to call my sister." So he calls his sister on the phone and tells her the news. And she has the same reaction. "This is nuts. This is crazy. After 45 years, they are not allowed to get a divorce." And so she picks up the phone. She calls her dad. He picks up. And she says, "Dad, what are you guys thinking? You can't get a divorce. Don't worry about it. We're going to come. I got a plane ticket. My brother and I, we're going to fly out tomorrow. We'll be there. Do not do anything until we get there." And so he hangs up the phone and he looks at his wife and he says, "It's all taken care of. Both kids are coming for Christmas and they're going to pay their own way." I told first service, I'm really glad that worked. It was one of those I wasn't sure. It's like, is this going to be okay? Or is it going to be crickets? I don't know. What I love about this story, though, is that it points to the fact that we have trouble having difficult conversations with other people, right? We always want to avoid the hard conversation. I mean, what he should have done is pick up the phone and call his kids and say, "I miss you. We want you to come home and be with us for Christmas. And by the way, you're old enough to pay for yourself at this point," right? That's the conversation that should have taken place, but it didn't. We're going to wrap up this sermon series on the Gospel of John. It's been titled Conversations with Jesus. And we've been looking all throughout the Gospel of John at these difficult conversations that Jesus has had with people. He's not shied away from them. And we're going to close out the Gospel, I think, appropriately with Peter and Jesus having a tough conversation. Once more, Jesus is not going to shy away from this. But we need to set it in context. You'll remember that basically today our text picks up in the middle of the story. It started last week in chapter 21 with Peter, as we talked about, probably not being in a great headspace. He was probably pretty upset. He had denied his Savior 3 times in his darkest moment. And while Jesus had appeared to the disciples 2 times at this point, he hadn't really talked to Peter about this. They hadn't been able to work out this brokenness in their relationship quite in the same way that Thomas and Peter were able to do. And Peter was probably feeling some shame with his friends, his companions about what had happened. And so he's not in a great place, and he goes fishing. And that's where Jesus appears on the shore, and he begins this reconciliation process with Peter. And what does Peter do? He jumps into the water, and he goes towards Jesus. Peter is ready to work this out too. And Jesus has a meal prepared for them. And we talked about how that meal was a sign of welcome. It was a sign of hospitality and friendship. It was Jesus' initial act towards Peter of saying, we're okay. We're going to repair this relationship. But now the meal is over, and it's time to have the conversation. And so Jesus asks Peter this question. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Now, this is actually a little bit of an ambiguous question. There's at least 3 different ways we could take this. Is he saying, Peter, do you love me more than these other disciples love me? If we were to measure love, do you love me the most? More than any of these other people that have been following me, do you love me the most? Another way is he might be asking Peter, do you love me more than you love these other disciples? Who do you love more, me or them? And then there's a third way to possibly look at it. We got to remember the setting and where we're at. We're standing on the shore of a lake, and there's a boat, and there's a net, and there's a huge catch of fish, probably worth a lot of money. This is Peter's former life. And Jesus might be saying, do you love me more than these things? Do you love me more than your career? Do you love me more than this lucrative catch of fish? Do you love me more than all of this? It's not quite clear. One of the mistakes I think we make in biblical interpretation is we seem to get locked into this idea that it has to mean one thing, but we've seen in John's gospel that oftentimes there's multiple levels of meaning, and I just can't help but wonder if John isn't purposely leaving this ambiguous. Because the question is really this: am I your primary affection in life? Will you subordinate all other affections to me? Whether it's other people, whether it's other things, am I your primary affection? That is the question being asked of Peter at this moment. I came across a story that just fascinated me. There was a baseball player by the name of Grant Desmey. He was selected in the 2nd round in 2007 by the Oakland Athletics. Only 20% of people, of draftees picked in the 2nd round, actually make it to the show. Only 20% actually play in a Major League Baseball game, but Grant was beating the odds. He was moving up in the farm system. And if you ask the scouts, they would say he's going to be an everyday player. It's just a matter of time. And they saw him as being on the cusp of signing a contract, a pretty lucrative contract. But here's the thing. He shocked the scouts and the world of baseball when at age 23 he retired from the game. Because Grant was a Christian. And he felt a call of God on his life, and he was wondering if he was called to be a priest or not. So he actually retired from baseball and went to live in a monastery to pursue this call, this potential call that he might have. That, my friends, is subordinating all other affections. I don't think I could have done it, walk away from a Major League Baseball contract, but he did. The Lord was his primary affection. And that's what Jesus is asking of Peter. That's what he's asking of us today. What is your primary affection? Is it me or is it something else? And so 3 different times Jesus asks Peter, do you love me? 3 different times, corresponding to the 3 times that Peter betrayed Jesus. And every time, Peter responds in the affirmative, and afterwards Jesus says, feed my lambs, shepherd my sheep, feed my lambs. You know what's striking to me about this? There's this tie to his denials. And what Jesus is doing is he's restoring him, but he's not just bringing him back into the fold, he's actually bringing him into a place of leadership. He's not saying, just come back in, but I want you to come back and I want you to lead my people. I mean, so often we look at ourselves, we look at our failures, we look at our brokenness, we look at our missteps, and we say, that disqualifies us. It makes me not fit for that position. And yet, Jesus is looking at Peter and saying, I want you to come and be a leader. And I can't help but wonder if Peter, having gone through this and the way it shaped him, the way it changed him, it prepared him to be the kind of leader that he would not have been prepared to be before had he not gone through this experience. So many times our brokenness qualifies us rather than disqualifying us for ministry. And so 3 times he gets asked this question, do you love me? And it's a tough conversation. I mean, Jesus is really pressing in on the issue. He's really asking Peter to reflect on his commitment. I mean, he was so bold back in chapter 13. Lord, I'll die for you. I will go to death for you. And here now we see that there's some more humility. I mean, Peter doesn't respond and say, yeah, I love you way more than these jokers. I love you way more. He doesn't do that because it's forming him. It's shaping him. And in fact, it ends up hurting Peter that he gets asked 3 separate times. I mean, too often we make God all about puppies and rainbows. Oh, you did that. That's okay. That's not a big deal. That sin is just fine. We'll just look over that. God loves us too much to do that. He loves Peter too much to just pass over what's happened. He really wants to press in and have this difficult conversation with Peter and force him to reflect on where he's at in his affection with Jesus. And so 3 times it happens. And each time Peter responds, yes. Now, you may have heard a bunch of sermons on this text. I know that I have. And one of the common things that people often, one of the common ways of interpreting these 3 different messages or these 3 different queries from Jesus focus on the language that's used, the vocabulary. So in case you're not initiated into this whole idea, when Jesus first asked Peter, do you love me? He uses the verbal form of the Greek word agape, which in sort of normal, sort of popular Christianity, that's interpreted to mean God's unconditional love. That's what agape love is. And so Jesus is saying to Peter, do you love me unconditionally? Well, Peter responds and he says, Lord, you know I love you. And he uses the word phileo, which is a brotherly kind of love. And so the idea is that Jesus is saying, Peter, do you love me unconditionally? And Peter's saying, I love you like a brother. I have a brotherly love for you. It's this idea of humility coming into his life, right? He's not quite so bold as he was before. And so then Jesus says again, do you love me unconditionally? Using the agapao form. Peter says, you know I love you. I love you like a brother. And then finally, the 3rd time, Jesus switches and he uses the phileo language. Do you love me like a brother, Peter? And Peter says, yes, you know that I love you like a brother. That's one way to look at it. But there's this other interpretation that scholars have kind of flipped that idea on its head, and they argue that, well, that agapao love is really, it's really a kind of a cold love. It's a cerebral act of the will kind of thing. And phileo love is sort of this affectionate, passionate, a more desirable kind of love to have. And so that way of looking at it is Jesus is saying, Peter, has your love for me grown cold? Peter says, no, my love for you, it's affectionate. Peter, is your love for me grown cold? No, it's affectionate. Peter, is your love for me really affectionate? Yes, Lord, you know that it is. And then there's a third possibility, which is the one I think is actually going on here. He's just using synonyms. He's just avoiding redundancy here. And we actually see it in the passage. Because when Jesus, after he asks Peter if he loves him, and Peter says yes, he says, feed my lambs, shepherd my sheep, feed my lambs. He's just switching his vocabulary. But again, maybe John's leaving this open for us, creating some space for the Spirit to speak to us as we read this text. And so the exchange wraps up. But Jesus isn't finished with his difficult statement. So what does he say to Peter? When you were younger, you used to put on your own belt and you went where you wanted to go. But when you're older, somebody's going to put a belt on you and they're going to lead you where you don't want to go, and you're going to stretch out your hands. And this was to indicate the fact that Peter was going to be martyred. There's a legend, I guess we would call it, that he was crucified upside down, but we have actually no valid historical background to support that. That whole idea comes from the Gospel or the Acts of Peter, which is a Gnostic gospel, and it has weird stuff in it, like dogs talking and things like that. So it's not exactly like the most reliable source for us to use, but what we do know is that the church fathers speak unanimously that Peter did lay down his life in some way for Jesus, whether it was crucifixion, right side up, upside down, we don't know, but he did become that rock that he was declared to be back in chapter 1. And so after Jesus announces this, he says to Peter, follow me. This is beautiful if you ask me, because it's like we've gone back to chapter 1. It's like he's starting all over with Peter. He's saying, the slate has been wiped clean. I know you might have messed up, but we're good. We've worked through it, and now we're starting over. And then what happens next is beautiful. Peter opens his mouth and does what Peter does and reveals the fact that he still doesn't fully get it. Follow me. Well, what about this guy over here? Well, Peter, that's none of your business. You need to follow me. I love that, because that's my kind of people. Somebody that's messed up, been corrected, restored, and then within seconds has screwed up again. That's my kind of people. That's the kind of disciple I am. I have a professor, or one of my former professors at Asbury, Ben Witherington. He has this quip that he likes to say, that they're the disciples, the D-U-H, the disciples. And it's clever, but I used to sit there in class and I used to think, could you do any better? Are you that smart? I mean, if you put me in first century Judaism, would I even have given up my business to go follow him? We're way too hard on these guys. But I am so glad that we have an example like Peter, because it's like, man, I can relate to that. I don't get it right often. And when I do, it's not too long before something's been messed up again. And Peter just doesn't get it. And so Jesus says, you need to focus on following me. One of my favorite baseball movies is a movie called For Love of the Game. It's a fictional movie, but Kevin Costner stars in it, and he plays this pitcher by the name of Billy Chappell. And he's a pitcher for the Detroit Tigers. He's nearing the end of his career, and he's about to pitch in what's probably his final game for this particular season. And that morning, he finds out that he's going to be traded. And Billy Chappell, he has been a Detroit Tiger his entire life. He's never known anything else but to be a Tiger. And now he finds out that he's going to be traded. So he goes into this baseball game with this question in his mind. Do I retire? Do I hang it up? Or do I go in the trade? What should I do? And so that's in his mind, but they're playing the Yankees, and it's not just any other game because the Yankees have a playoff shot. And the Tigers want to spoil it for him, so he wants to pitch, and he wants to pitch good, and he gets out on the mound, and he starts to warm up, and it's in New York, right? And so there's all these New Yorkers yelling at him and screaming at him, telling him he's too old, telling him that he stinks. They've got these horns that they're blowing at him, and he stands on the mound, and he just kind of shakes his head, and he says, I can always tell when I'm in New York. There's all these distractions, right? Is he going to retire or not? Is he going to be traded? Everyone's yelling at him, telling him he's not worth it, he's not good. Everything is trying to pull his attention away, and then he stands up on the mound and he says, clear the mechanism. And as soon as that happened, everything gets blurry except for him, 60 feet 6 inches, home plate, the umpire, the batter, and his catcher. And it goes silent. And he's completely focused in this moment. That's what I think Jesus is saying to Peter. You need to clear the mechanism, buddy. Your focus needs to be on me. Let all that other stuff go. Let those distractions go. Let your affection be solely on me, and let these distractions go. I've really enjoyed getting all of these texts about Peter throughout the sermon series. I kind of feel like I've gotten to know him. You know, a lot of people, when they get to heaven, they say, who do you want to meet? Well, of course, Jesus, and people say Paul. I'm really looking forward to meeting Peter, actually. I feel like he's a guy I could hang out with. And it's powerful how God takes this person who is so flawed, who is so broken, who can be so obtuse sometimes, and uses him for such amazing things. Just read on into the book of Acts. My friend, he made a cross for me when I was in college. It was a wooden cross. It wasn't very big. And in the center of it, he took a bunch of broken pottery pieces and kind of made a mosaic throughout the center of the cross beam and the upright beam. And I remember one time I was sitting in my office and I was looking at this cross, and I happened to notice that at the point of the cross where the upright beam and the cross beam intersect, there was this one piece of pottery that had broken into kind of an L shape, and it just fit perfectly around that corner. And I thought to myself, if that piece hadn't been broken exactly like that, it couldn't be used right there. It was because it was broken in that particular way that it was able to be placed within these other broken pieces and used to create something beautiful. So many times it is from our brokenness, because we are broken in a particular way, that God is able to use us in ways that he can't use other people, in a way that he couldn't otherwise use us. As I wrap up this morning, I want to share with you a song. Don't worry, I'm not going to sing it. That would be enjoyable for no one. You guys might really get angry, but it's a song by an artist by the name of Matthew West. It's a Christian song. I'm sure maybe many of you in this room have heard it, but it's called Broken Things. And one of the things that I think is one of the secrets of the kingdom is that God doesn't use anything but broken things. And you might say, well, Jesus is an exception to that, but it was in his brokenness that our healing was achieved. God seems to use nothing but broken things, and there is not a person in this room that isn't broken in some way or another. So I want to share the lyrics with you just to kind of put them on your heart before we listen to it. Normally I close with a couple of questions and some silent reflection time, but what we're going to do is actually listen to the song as we close out for our reflection time. But the song begins like this. If grace was a kingdom, I stopped at the gate, thinking I don't deserve to pass through after all the mistakes that I've made. So many times we think that something's disqualified us, that we've made too many mistakes, we're too broken, we're too whatever, and that grace is not for us, and so we have to stand outside the gates. But the chorus goes like this: now I'm just a beggar in the presence of a king. I wish I could bring so much more. But if it's true that you use broken things, then here I am, Lord. I'm all yours. And then this part brings me to tears almost every time. The pages of history, they tell me it's true, that it's never the perfect. It's always the ones with the scars that you use. It's the rebels and the prodigals. It's the humble and the weak. All the misfit heroes that you chose tell me that there's hope for sinners like me. There is no such thing as too broken. We are all broken, and there's this wonderful theme in Scripture that all these people that God chooses to use, they're all messed up in some way or another. Every one of us in this room is messed up in some way or another. And the choice is, are we going to step forward and say, here I am, I wish I had more to offer, but I'm all yours. Use me. And the song concludes this way: grace is a kingdom with gates open wide. There's a seat at the table just waiting for you, so come on inside. So that's my question for you this morning. As you sit there in that seat, in your brokenness, whatever that looks like for you, are you willing to come inside this morning? Are you willing to say, I'm a broken thing, and I wish I had more to offer, but here I am, I'm all yours. Let's pray. Lord, as we hear these words and listen to this song, I pray especially for those in here who feel that they are broken beyond repair, that they belong outside the kingdom, that you bring them in to your kingdom of grace this morning. I pray for all of us, Lord. Would you help us to see how you can use our brokenness to touch others in a powerful way?